The cowboy fed a starving woman, but her true identity changed everything. A cowboy saves a frail woman from certain death. But the real danger isn't the bandits, and the truth about her identity is more terrifying than anyone could imagine. Betrayal, mystery, and a secret that could destroy everything lie ahead. Don't blink, or you'll miss it. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty expanse of the prairie. A solitary figure rode across the vast, unforgiving landscape. A man with a weathered hat pulled low over his brow, his rugged face etched with the lines of hard living. Jack Thompson was a cowboy, a soul born and bred in the heart of the Wild West. He had seen the worst and the best of humanity, and today, as he guided his horse through the parched earth, he could feel the weight of solitude pressing down on him like the oppressive heat of the day. The wind whispered secrets as it swept across the land, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the distant sound of a river that had long since dried up. Jack had lost much in his 38 years, his family to the ruthless grip of fever, his dreams to the harsh realities of ranch life. Yet, amid the desolation, he held on to a stubborn belief in kindness, a flickering ember that refused to be extinguished. He often thought that perhaps it was the only thing that kept him tethered to the world. As he crested a gentle rise, something caught his eye, a glint of metal against the dull browns and greens of the prairie. Curiosity piqued, he nudged his horse forward, the hooves pounding softly against the earth. The sight that met him made his heart race. There, half buried in the dirt, lay an overturned wagon, its wooden frame splintered, and its contents strewn across the ground. It looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Jack dismounted and approached cautiously, the air thick with the scent of sun-baked wood and the faint trace of something sweet and metallic. As he neared the wreckage, his heart sank. This was no ordinary wagon. It bore the marks of a recent struggle. A torn piece of fabric fluttered in the wind, and Jack's instincts screamed at him to be wary. Yet, he had never been one to turn his back on someone in need. Searching through the debris, he stumbled upon a large crate, its lid ajar. Inside were supplies, a few cans of beans, a sack of flour, and a small bundle of blankets. But what truly drew his attention was a soft whimper that echoed from beneath the wagon. Jack's heart raced, and he knelt down, peering into the shadowy underbelly of the vehicle. There, curled up and trembling, was a woman. Her skin was pale and gaunt, her clothes tattered and stained. The rawness of her vulnerability struck him like a blow. Without hesitation, Jack reached out, his strong hands grasping her wrist gently. "Hey there, miss," he said softly, hoping to ease her fear. "You're safe now. Let's get you out of here." The woman's eyes flickered open, wide and frightened, reflecting a mixture of relief and disbelief. She mustered the strength to nod, her voice barely a whisper as she replied, I thought I was alone." With careful urgency, Jack pulled her from the wreckage, his heart racing at the sight of her frail form. She was a ghost of a woman, skin stretched tight over her bones, hair a tangled mess of dirt and despair. Yet there was something in her gaze, a flicker of hope, that ignited a protective instinct deep within him. He had seen too much suffering in his life to turn away now. He led her to a patch of shade beneath a nearby tree, the branches swaying gently in the breeze. Jack fished out a can of beans from the crate and offered it to her, watching as she hesitated before accepting. Her hands trembled as she opened the can, and he could see the desperation in her eyes as she took her first bite. It was a simple act, but to her, it was a lifeline. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice raspy but filled with gratitude. "I thought I would die out there." "Don't mention it," Jack replied, leaning back against the rough bark of the tree, keeping a watchful eye on the horizon. "What happened to you? You got a name?" "Lila," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "I was traveling with my brother. We were headed to Silver Creek. Bandits attacked us. I thought I could hide, but they took everything." "Lila," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "I was traveling with my brother. We were headed to Silver Creek. Bandits attacked us. I thought I could hide, but they took everything." Jack's heart sank at her words, the harsh realities of the West flooding back to him in a rush. He had heard stories of ruthless bandits, men who preyed on the weak and left destruction in their wake. "I'm sorry, Lila," he said, his voice steady. "I'll help you. We can find your brother, if he's still out there." Her eyes brightened with a flicker of hope, but it was quickly replaced by a shadow of doubt. "He's probably dead, or worse. I was supposed to protect him. I failed." Jack felt a pang in his chest. He recognized that familiar ache of loss and regret, the weight of responsibility that could crush a man's spirit. "You didn't fail," he said, his voice firm. "You survived. That's what matters. You're stronger than you think." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the desolate land, Jack found himself drawn to Lila's quiet strength. There was something about her resilience that stirred within him, a reminder of the goodness that still flickered in the world, even amidst the darkness. He knew he had to help her, not just out of obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. But even as he made plans to search for her brother, a gnawing feeling settled in his gut. He sensed that Lila's story was more than just one of loss and survival. There was a depth to her, a hidden truth that lay just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. And as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were intertwined in a way he could not yet understand. He had no idea that the act of kindness he had shown would set off a chain of events that would forever change his life. And in the vast, empty expanse of the Wild West, where cruelty often reigned, the seeds of compassion were about to bloom in ways he could never have imagined. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the prairie. Jack Thompson stood beside Lila, the evening air thick with the scent of dust and dried grass. They were near the remains of the overturned wagon, its wooden frame twisted and splintered like the dreams of those who had once traveled with it. Jack's heart ached for Lila, not just for her frail form but for the weight of sorrow she carried. He could see it in her eyes, a storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. "Let's get you on your feet," Jack said, breaking the silence that hung between them like a heavy blanket. His voice was low and steady, a comforting balm against the harshness of their surroundings. He extended a hand toward her, rough and calloused from years spent in the saddle. Lila hesitated for a moment, her gaze flitting from his hand to the horizon. She could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, a stark contrast to the chill of loneliness that had settled in her bones. Finally she took his hand, her grip weak but grateful. Jack helped her rise, the effort revealing just how fragile she truly was. The edges of her face, once sharp with pain, softened as she stood. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above the rustle of the prairie grass. Jack nodded, feeling a strange sense of urgency. "We should find some shelter for the night. It ain't safe out here after dark." His eyes darted around, scanning the vast expanse for any sign of danger or a place to rest. "There's a cave a few miles from here. I reckon we could make it before sundown." Lila's brow furrowed, doubt clouding her features. "What about the bandits?" she asked, her voice tinged with fear. Memories of the attack flashed before her eyes. Shouting men, the sound of gunfire, her brother's laughter cut short. Jack's heart sank at the mention of the bandits. "I'll protect you, Lila. I promise." The weight of his own unspoken fears settled in his chest. He'd faced down more than his share of trouble in his days, but this was different. This was about more than just survival. It was about keeping a promise that he felt deep in his bones. Drawing a deep breath, Lila straightened her back, determination flickering in her eyes. "I'll go with you." She took a step forward, her foot sinking slightly into the dry earth. But she didn't falter. With a nod, Jack led the way, their footsteps muffled by the soft crunch of dirt and gravel beneath them. The prairie, vast and unforgiving, surrounded them, a sea of gold and green illuminated by the fading sun. Jack stole glances at her as they walked, noting the way her hair caught the light, a cascade of chestnut that danced with each step. She was a fragile thing, yet there was a spark within her that ignited a flicker of hope in Jack's heart. As they walked, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of Lila's silence. He needed to know more about her, to bridge the gap between them that felt as wide as the prairie itself. "What was your brother's name?" he asked, his voice steady against the whispers of the wind. "Eli," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "He was the brave one, always protecting me." A shadow crossed her face, and Jack felt the depth of her loss. "I should have been with him. I should have." "Lila," he interrupted gently, "you don't have to blame yourself." The words felt heavy on his tongue, but he meant them. "We can't change what's happened. All we can do is move forward." She looked at him then, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But what if I can't? What if he's—" Her voice caught, breaking under the weight of her fear. Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find him," he vowed, the conviction in his voice firm. "Together." The promise hung in the air, firm as the mountains that loomed in the distance, their rugged peaks standing sentinel against the fading light. They continued walking, the sky above shifting from gold to deep orange, then finally to shades of violet and indigo as dusk settled over the land. As they neared the cave, Jack pointed it out, a dark mouth nestled among the rocks, a sanctuary against the elements. "There it is," he said, his voice low. The cave looked inviting, a slice of safety in a world that felt increasingly dangerous. Once inside, the cool air wrapped around them, a stark contrast to the heat of the day. Jack pulled out his small stash of supplies, dried meat and bread, offering it to Lila. "It ain't much, but it'll keep you going." She accepted it with trembling hands, her eyes wide. "You sure you don't want any?" The sincerity in her voice tugged at his heartstrings. "Not hungry," he lied. The truth was that he could feel his own stomach gnawing at him, but he wouldn't let her see that. He wanted her to eat, to regain her strength. As she took a small bite, the tension in the air began to ease, if only a little. Jack settled against the cave wall, watching her with a mixture of admiration and concern. In the flickering light of a small fire he had managed to spark, he noticed the way her features softened as she chewed, the ghost of a smile flitting across her lips. "Thank you for this," she said after a moment, her voice stronger now. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack shrugged, a modest gesture that belied the warmth spreading through his chest. "Just doing what anyone would do." Silence enveloped them, thick as the night outside. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the distant call of a coyote, a reminder of the world that lay beyond their little sanctuary. Jack leaned back, letting his mind drift to the vastness of the night sky, speckled with stars like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" Lila asked suddenly, her voice breaking through his reverie. Jack turned to her, surprised by the depth of her question. "Out there?" He gestured vaguely toward the entrance of the cave. "Just more prairie, more dust. Maybe some folks looking for trouble." Lila shook her head, a wistfulness in her gaze. "I mean, beyond that. Beyond the prairie and the dust. There's got to be more to life than this." Jack considered her words, feeling a strange kinship to her longing. "Ain't much out here, that's for sure," he replied slowly. "But sometimes you find beauty in the struggle. Like a wildflower blooming in a crack of rock." Her eyes sparkled with understanding. "You're right. Even in the darkest moments there can be light." They shared a quiet moment, both contemplating the weight of her words. Jack felt an undeniable connection with Lila, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. The world outside might be cruel, but here, In this cave, they were safe. They shared a quiet moment, both contemplating the weight of her words. Jack felt an undeniable connection with Lila, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. The world outside might be cruel, but here, in this cave, they were safe. Yet even as hope blossomed in the depths of the cave, Jack felt a shadow of doubt lurking at the edges of his mind. Lila was more than just a woman in need. She carried secrets, a past that would inevitably intertwine with his own. And though he wanted to help her, to save her brother, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were destined for more than just survival. As the night deepened, the stars twinkled overhead like watchful eyes. Jack leaned back against the cave wall, the warmth of the fire flickering against his skin. He could feel Lila's presence beside him, a fragile light in the darkness, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to hope. Tomorrow they would search for Eli, and Jack was determined to uncover the truth behind Lila's past. But for now, in this moment of quiet refuge, they would share their stories, breathe in the fragile beauty of the night, and perhaps, just perhaps, find solace in one another's company. The first light of dawn crept into the cave, casting long shadows that danced across the rugged walls like spirits of the past. Jack Thompson stirred awake, the cool air biting at his skin as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. He could hear the distant call of a hawk, its sharp cry slicing through the stillness of the morning, a reminder that the world outside was already bustling with life. The weight of the night's conversation lingered in his mind, as heavy as the dust that coated his boots. He glanced over at Lila, who still lay curled up beside the fire pit, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders like a waterfall of ink. The flickering embers cast a warm glow on her face, softening the lines of worry that had etched themselves into her features. Jack felt a pang of protectiveness for her, a feeling so foreign yet so right, like a well-worn saddle finally finding its place on a horse's back. He stood, careful not to disturb her, and stepped outside into the wild expanse of the prairie. The sun had just begun its ascent, painting the sky in hues of burnt orange and soft pink. The earthy scent of sagebrush mixed with the crisp morning air, invigorating Jack's senses. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the bittersweet smell of freedom and survival. This land was unforgiving, but it had a beauty that resonated deep within him, a beauty that spoke of resilience and the spirit of the West. As Jack surveyed the landscape, he spotted a small herd of deer grazing in the distance, their graceful forms silhouetted against the rising sun. He marveled at their ease, their untroubled existence, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had brought him and Lila together. With a sigh, he turned back toward the cave, where Lila was beginning to stir. "Morning, Lila," he greeted her as he stepped inside, the warmth of the fire flickering around them. "Morning, Jack," she replied, her voice still thick with sleep. She stretched, the movement causing her shirt to ride up slightly, revealing a glimpse of scars that marred her skin. Jack's heart twisted at the sight. He knew those marks told stories of pain and survival, stories she might not yet be ready to share. "How'd you sleep?" he asked, attempting to keep the conversation light. "Better than I expected," she admitted, rubbing her eyes. "I guess the company helps." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her gaze. "We should get moving soon. We've got a long way to go if we're going to find your brother." Lila's expression darkened at the mention of Eli, the flicker of hope in her eyes quickly replaced by a shadow of worry. "I just hope he's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "Let's focus on today," Jack said, trying to reassure her. "One step at a time. We'll find him." They shared a modest breakfast of jerky and biscuits, the food tasting surprisingly better in the glow of companionship. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken thoughts and shared fears. Jack wondered what Eli looked like. What kind of brother would have been strong enough to keep Lila safe in the face of danger? He wanted to know more about her life, but he sensed the walls she had built around her heart. As they packed their belongings, Jack's mind replayed the details of their surroundings, a mental map forming in his head. If we head toward the river, we might find tracks or signs that could lead us to Eli, he suggested, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun began to rise higher. Sounds good, Lila replied, her voice steadier now. There was something in her tone that made Jack believe she was starting to regain her strength, even if only slightly. Before long, they set off, the sun climbing higher in the sky as they ventured into the vast expanse of the prairie. The heat began to wrap around them like a heavy blanket, making the air thick and still. Jack kept an eye on Lila, noting how she positioned herself slightly behind him, as if she needed the reassurance of his presence to bolster her courage. As they walked, Jack told her stories of the land, tales of cowboys and rustlers, of the fierce storms that could sweep across the plains without warning, and of the wild mustangs that roamed free under the endless sky. Lila listened intently, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. For the first time since they met, she smiled, a real smile that lit up her face. "Did you ever catch a mustang?" she asked, her voice lilting with excitement. Jack chuckled, recalling the time he had attempted to tame a particularly stubborn stallion. Caught him, sure, but it was like trying to hold on to a tornado. That critter had spirit, you know. Just like this land. He gestured to the vastness around them. Spirit, Lila echoed, the word tasting sweet on her tongue. I think I've forgotten what that feels like. Jack glanced at her, a surge of empathy flooding through him. You'll find it again, Lila. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Her expression flickered, a mix of gratitude and vulnerability. I hope you're right, she murmured, her gaze fixed firmly ahead. As they continued their trek, the landscape morphed from open prairie to rugged hills, the ground beneath their boots shifting from dust to rocky soil. The sun bore down mercilessly, beads of sweat forming on Jack's brow, but he pressed on, a steady rhythm to his steps. He thought of the river they were heading toward, the cool water promising relief from the heat, and maybe even a bit of hope for Lila. They stopped for a moment to catch their breath, the sound of their heavy breathing mingling with the rustle of grass in the wind. Jack took a swig from his canteen, then offered it to Lila, who accepted it gratefully. Thank you, she said, her lips curling around the words, the warmth of gratitude radiating from her. Don't mention it. Just don't go drinking it all at once, he teased, matching her smile with one of his own. As they resumed their journey, the terrain began to dip, revealing the winding path of the river below, glinting like a ribbon of silver in the sunlight. Jack felt a swell of anticipation. If they could reach the water, they might find tracks or even other travelers who could point them in the right direction. But as they neared the riverbank, the atmosphere shifted. A tension settled in the air, thick and heavy. The sound of the water rushing over the rocks seemed to carry whispers of warnings, and Jack's instincts kicked in. He slowed his pace, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Jack? Lila's voice trembled slightly, pulling him from his thoughts. What is it? He held up a hand, signaling her to stop. Just listen. The world around them fell silent, save for the rushing water. Then, faintly, Jack heard it. The unmistakable sound of horses approaching. His heart raced as he turned to face Lila, his expression shifting to one of concern. We need to hide, he urged, glancing around for cover. There was a thicket of bushes nearby, and he gestured for her to follow him. They crouched low, the world outside their small sanctuary fading as they held their breath, listening intently. The sound of hooves grew louder, reverberating through the air like a drumbeat echoing in a canyon. Jack's mind raced. Bandits? Rangers? He had no way of knowing, but he could feel the tension in Lila beside him, her body stiff with fear. Peering through the branches, Jack caught sight of a group of riders approaching. They were rugged men, their faces weathered by the sun, eyes sharp as they scanned the landscape. He recognized the way they moved, hardened and predatory, like wolves on the hunt. "Stay quiet," he whispered to Lila, his voice low and steady. "We'll wait them out." They watched as the men dismounted, their voices low but laced with an edge of aggression. Jack couldn't make out the words, but the menace in their tone sent a chill down his spine. He felt Lila's hand grip his arm, the tension radiating off her in waves. "Jack, what if they find us?" she breathed, her eyes wide with fear. "We'll be fine," he reassured her, though his own heart raced with uncertainty. "Just stay still." The men moved closer, their laughter cutting through the stillness like a knife. Jack's instincts screamed at him to act, to protect Lila. He glanced at her, and in that moment, he saw the flicker of determination in her eyes, a spark that reminded him of the mustangs he had once tried to tame. Then one of the men turned, scanning the thicket where they hid. Jack held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "Let's move," he said quietly, pulling Lila with him as they slipped deeper into the underbrush, hoping to evade detection. As they hurried away from the river, Jack could feel the weight of Lila's presence beside him, the connection between them forged in the fire of fear and survival. They were bound by circumstance, but as they faced the unknown together, Jack sensed something deeper, a flicker of hope in the face of their shared struggles. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirring of something different, something worth fighting for. A chance to protect Lila, to help her reclaim her spirit, and perhaps to find his own in the process.